guys, it's Tara. Booktubeathon 2018 has officially come to an end, and today we're going to wrap up all the challenges that I did for it and the books that I read this week. Booktubeathon was everywhere that I looked this week. A whole bunch of booktubers that I follow were doing the challenges and doing reading vlogs, and everyone on Twitter is talking about the books that they're reading, and the challenges on Instagram had hundreds, sometimes over 1,000 wonderful pictures to look through. The entire community was coming together to take part in this one event that I was also taking part in, and it made me feel more a part of that community than I think I have since I started my channel. This was my first Booktubeathon. I had no idea what to expect, and I didn't expect to be able to do a whole lot of the challenges, but I really surprised myself with how much I pulled off. I did the video challenges on days 1, 2, and 6. Day 1's challenge was to recreate a book cover using things that you find around your house. So when I went looking for things that I might be able to use, I found my son's Thor doll, and that red cape immediately gave me the idea to do A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. I think it turned out pretty well. I hope it turned out pretty well. Day 2's challenge was to build a house of books in 30 seconds, and I knew in 30 seconds I was not going to be able to do anything super tall, super impressive, or really creative, so instead of just making a house, I once again used some of my son's toys to make a home. And day 6's challenge was to write a poem using book titles, but all the books' spines had to be the same color. As soon as I heard this prompt, I immediately started getting ideas for what titles from my bookshelf would work the best together, so I had to do the challenge. I'll link all of those video challenges below if you haven't seen them yet. And I did a few of the challenges over on Instagram as well. On day 1, I took a picture of my son reading a book that I had when I was a kid. That's one of the books that got me into reading. On day 2, I used a stack of books to spell out Booktubeathon along the right hand side. I don't know if anybody picked up on that. On day 4, I took a picture of me and my son with each of our Harry Potter collections. And on day 5, for a book that matched its background, I pretty closely recreated the cover of the Bookshop of Yesterdays by Amy Meyerson. I'm still a little sore that I didn't get an honorable mention for that one, but it's fine. And now onto the reading challenges and the books that I read for them. Speaking of the Bookshop of Yesterdays, this is the first book that I read for Booktubeathon. It fulfilled Challenge 1, let a coin toss decide your first read. Challenge 2, read a book about something that you want to do, and challenge 4, read a book with green on the cover. This is about a girl named Miranda whose uncle Billy owns a bookstore and sets up scavenger hunts for her there, until he has a mysterious falling out with her mom and completely disappears from her life for the next 16 years, at which point she finds out that he has died and he's left her the almost bankrupt bookstore and one final scavenger hunt through which she learns the family history that she never knew and the truth about why her uncle left her life. I expected to love this book, but I didn't. This book is about 360 pages long, and for that length, not a lot happens in here. It could have easily been 100 pages shorter, or even more than that. I expected a lot more from the scavenger hunt. There just weren't a whole lot of clues to solve, and Miranda took a long time to solve each one. And it was kind of like Ready Player One in that you had to be familiar with what the clues were about. In Ready Player One, it was 80s pop culture. In this book, it was classic literature. And in Ready Player One, I didn't know a whole lot about 80s pop culture. I didn't get a lot of the references, but I still really enjoyed that aspect of the book. I loved the hunt, I loved the clues, I loved watching the characters figure it out and getting to that next step, but not so with the Bookshop of Yesterdays. I just didn't care. What really ruined the book for me though was that it is extremely predictable. I guessed the big twist ending reveal on page 68, which I think is 18% through, and that's not okay. That's not okay. It's one thing to have suspicions and maybe to eventually guess it before it happens, but I should not figure out your entire endgame on the first clue that you drop for it. Because I knew where the entire thing was going, I couldn't really enjoy the journey. Well, there's some thunder. I'd rate this at the lower end of 3 stars. I think if you are really familiar with classic literature, you'd probably get more out of this book, or if you're really bad at guessing twist endings, you would like it, but other than that, you could probably skip this one. Next up is Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children by Ransom Riggs. This book completed challenge number 3, to read and watch a book to movie adaptation, and challenge 6, to read a book with a beautiful spine. This is about a boy named Jacob who, as a kid, loved the fantastical stories So I think we have a storm coming, who as a kid loved the fantastical stories his grandfather told him about the home for children that he grew up in and all the incredible kids that he knew there, until Jacob grew up and realized that the stories were just stories. But when Jacob's grandfather dies, he journeys to the children's home in hopes of finding the truth and some closure, but what he actually finds there is rather more peculiar. I expected this book to be really creepy, but it wasn't. But I loved it anyway. This had me hooked right from the start. It's such an interesting spin on the hero's journey, and it's such an interesting spin on a certain trope that I really love that I can't mention here because spoilers. I especially loved the character of Jacob. I thought he was so believable and realistic, and his attitude and sense of humor and sarcasm were making me smile all the way through the book, and I thought it was quite different from the typical YA male protagonist that I've been reading lately. His character arc wasn't that all original, but it was done in such a great way. I loved reading it. Holy crap. I loved a lot of the side characters too. Miss Peregrine herself was awesome, and Emma and her history with Abe and how it complicated things with Jacob, and Enoch and Bronwyn and Millard. I love Millard so much. I cannot wait to see more of Millard. The book is also littered with all these vintage photographs that I think were an interesting addition to the story, but a lot of the times they felt kind of shoehorned in, like the author was just trying to make an opportunity to throw in some pictures where the story could have stood perfectly well on its own without them. As for the movie, it was not nearly as good as the book. It was very watered down. It left out a lot of the plot and almost all of the character development. They severely changed Jacob's character in a way that I did not like at all. He went from this really interesting character with a lot of personality to a very dull, flat, cardboard cutout guy with zero personality. Thunder. Really? Just take a break. So I didn't love the movie, but I definitely loved this book. I would give it 4 stars overall, and I will absolutely be continuing with this series. So those were the 2 books that I was planning to read for Booktubeathon, but I kept forgetting to wear the hat when I was reading Miss Peregrine's for challenge number 5, wear a hat the whole time you're reading a book. So I decided to do that challenge with another book I was going to read in August anyway, and that is Very Good Lives, The Fringe Benefits of Failure and the Importance of Imagination by J.K. Rowling. This thunder just is going crazy. This is J.K. Rowling's commencement speech for the 2008 graduating class of Harvard University. There's not much to say about this book. It's a great speech. If you are a fan of J.K. Rowling, I highly recommend either reading this or, even better, watching her speech online. And while reading this book, I wore this hat, which I borrowed from my dear friend Kaylee from the Enchanted Library. Link to her channel down below. And now the rain is starting. It's really dark in here. So, it was Saturday morning, it was day 6, I'd finished 3 books. At this point, I only needed to read 4 more books to complete the 7-book challenge. I knew there was no way I was going to read 4 full-length novels in that amount of time, but I could probably read 4 graphic novels. So I went to the library. Ah! Holy crap, the power just went out! How is my son sleeping through this storm? I creak the floor when I go upstairs and he wakes up sometimes. He sleeps through all this thunder and the power out. So anyway, the next book that I read was 5 Very Good Reasons to Punch a Dolphin in the Mouth and Other Useful Guides by the Oatmeal. This isn't a graphic novel, it's a collection of webcomics, but it's still a book. I've long been a fan of the Oatmeal, so I figured I couldn't go wrong with one of his books. If you've never been introduced to the absolute bizarre randomness of the Oatmeal, go right now, you will not be disappointed. The randomness of this book includes 8 ways to improve your home using a human corpse, and 7 reasons to keep your Tyrannosaur off crack cocaine. But every so often with the Oatmeal, you also get some actually informative and educational, but still hilarious comics, like why Nikola Tesla is the most awesome geek who ever lived, and how to use a semicolon, the most feared punctuation on Earth. It was definitely a funny read, but I would give this book 3 stars because it's mostly the Oatmeal's early works, so the style isn't as developed as you'd see in his more recent comics. And also, there were just a lot of lists, like 7 reasons to do this, or 8 ways to do that, and I would have preferred more actual comics. And speaking of bizarre, with a capital B, Saga Volume 1 by Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples. This is a... thunder, thunder, thunder. So much thunder. This is a graphic novel about an odd couple who have just had a baby and are now on the run from the war that they both deserted. And that doesn't sound too bizarre, but the odd couple in question are a woman with dragonfly wings and a man with satyr horns, and the war is between a planet and its moon, and there's a prince with a TV screen for his head, and there's a literal spider woman and a ghost of a girl whose torso has been ripped off her body. It just doesn't end. I'd actually been wanting to read this for a while. My library didn't have it the last time I looked for it, but it was right there when I was browsing their graphic novels, so perfect timing. And it was interesting. It was very interesting, but it was really confusing because the first little bit of it just kept dropping so many names and terms and references without any context, so I just had no idea what was going on for the first half of it or so. Also, I didn't really buy that the main character was running around fighting enemies and hiking for days without sleeping after she'd just given birth, and yet she didn't pass out or bleed out for that matter. But I guess in a survival situation, you gotta do what you gotta do, regardless of whether or not you've just given birth. But still, just wasn't that realistic coming from someone who has given birth. Overall, I would give Saga Volume 1 3 stars. I am somewhat interested in continuing with the series, but I'm not in any rush. Next up is In Real Life by Cory Doctorow and Jen Wang. This is a graphic novel about a teenager named Anda who starts playing an MMORPG, and she meets and befriends a poor Chinese boy whose in-game avatar is a gold farmer. And that means that he collects valuable objects and then illegally sells them to other players. And at first, Anda is upset at this exploitation of the game, but she quickly realizes that questions of right and wrong in a virtual world are a little bit more complicated when someone's real life and livelihood are at stake. This addresses an issue that I think is too big to really explore in such a short graphic novel. If it was longer, or if it was even a series, I think it could have had a lot more impact. Also, I found it a bit unrealistic that she just started playing the game like 2 days ago, she's only hit level 2, but suddenly she's this super badass NPC slayer. But okay. 3 stars, it was good, but I would have liked to see more from it. And last but not least, Civil War, a Marvel Comics event written by Mark Millar and illustrated by a whole bunch of people that I can't remember right now. Their names will be down there. This is a collection Thunder. This is a collection of 7 issues of Marvel Comics in which the American government is trying to regulate superheroes and restrict their freedom to fight crime. And this splits the superheroes into 2 sides, one for and one against, and they end up fighting each other over who's right and who's wrong. I am a huge fangirl of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. There's literally kids screaming outside because of the thunder. Civil War is one of my favorites of the series, second only to the first Avengers movie, so I've been wanting to read the comics for a while now. But I honestly wasn't impressed. I am not a comics reader, so I know little about the Marvel world outside of the MCU, and there's so much more outside of it. There were dozens and dozens of characters in this book that I had no idea who they were, so I was really lost and really overwhelmed for a lot of this. And the story left a lot to be desired. There wasn't really a whole lot of story going on here. In the movie, there was tons of story, there was tons of plot. There was everything with the Sokovia Accords, and then there was everything with Bucky. There was just a really solid plot. But in this series of comics, there wasn't. It was really just fight after fight after fight after fight. Oh my god. He's still sleeping through this. How? How are you sleeping through this? So I guess I'll rate this 3 stars. I don't even feel qualified to rate this at all because, again, I'm not a comics reader. And I don't think I will be. I think I'm gonna just be sticking with the MCU from here on in. So in case you haven't been keeping track, that is 7 books, my friends. I read 7 books. I completed all 7 challenges for Booktubeathon 2018. I honestly did not think I could ever pull it off. I went into This is like some end of the world thunder happening right now. I went into Booktubeathon aiming to read 2 books and I ended up reading 7. I do feel like I cheated a little bit with graphic novels and comics, but they're still books and they still count. So I still beat all 7 challenges. I really had so much fun with Booktubeathon. I loved doing the challenges. I loved reading all week long. I loved seeing all of you with your challenges and your reading updates. It was such a great week for the community to come together and to do this great thing. It was so much fun. Thank you so much to the wonderful Ariel Bissett for hosting Booktubeathon, and thanks to everyone else who was involved in making this week such a great event. Let me know down below what you guys read this week and if you completed all 7 challenges, and if you liked the video and all the thunder. If you liked my wrap up, please give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more. Thank you so much for watching, everybody, and until next time, happy reading. Bye-bye.